At the outset of the Civil War, Lincoln made it clear that what he felt the nation was fighting for, the mission of the war, was to reunite the states. After a while, the mission of the war also included the end of slavery, but that took some time. In fact, the question of slavery was a complicated one in the mid-19th century. Many people believed that slavery itself was wrong, but they did not believe that equality should flow from an end of slavery. In fact, science itself claimed the belief that the white race was inherently superior to the black race.
Most African slavery had no deeper reason than legal punishment or intertribal warfare. But the Europeans who preached a universal religion, and who had long ago outlawed enslaving fellow Christians, needed justification for a practice so obviously at odds with their ideals of equality. So they claimed that Africans were biologically inferior and destined to be slaves, making great efforts to justify this theory. Thus, slavery in Europe and the Americas acquired a racial basis, making it impossible for slaves and their future descendants to attain equal status in society. In all
Audiences today, as well as audiences when it first came out, were absolutely shocked by some of the images that are in The Birth of a Nation. We can look at that film and we can see some of the black stereotypes that are going to, in many ways, dominate Hollywood cinema for decades to come. Predominant images there are these black bucks, these brutal African-American men. And during the Reconstruction period, they overtake the Southern community, they stop the whites from voting, they set up their own legislative session.
My professor screened the film Birth of a Nation, and they talked about all the cinematic innovations D.W. Griffith have come up with, this and that, but they did not, they left out everything that had to do with the social impact of the film. That this film regenerized the Klan. The Klan was dormant, it was dead, and brought about rebirth, and therefore, because of rebirth, there was rebirth of the Klan, it led directly to black people being lynched, strung up, castrated, and just murdered. But that was never discussed.
Racial terror lynchings of black people defined a shameful era in America. These lynchings differed from the hanging of white people in places where there was no functioning criminal justice system. Racial terror lynchings were directed at all black people. They enforced compliance with racial hierarchy and white supremacy, and ensured racial segregation and denial of equal rights.
Lynchings became so acceptable, onlookers would send picture postcards to friends and family. This card, depicting the horrific image of a burned corpse, casually notes, "This is the barbecue we had last night."
Keep in mind, there were children at some of these big events where they lynched people. That's one of the surprises to me in the whole story, is that, you know, in one case, 15,000 people showed up in a town square in their Sunday best.
This is just a fad. I think this, like I said, people has been shown that their background and ancestry and cultural values are no worse than anyone else's, and this is important.
There are now black bookshops to deal specifically with the outpourings of black awareness. The titles reveal the new move. Less concerned with integration and getting along with white people, more concerned with black independence and black power. The natural is the hairstyle of the Black Revolution. Once, Negroes spent many hours and dollars trying to get their hair straightened to look like white people. Now, many are getting it made curly again for the African look.
Black people are waking up. It takes some longer than others. This is very much a part of our identifying ourselves, you might say. This is just about all we have left to identify ourselves as.
Or hair?
Hair, this is true, because I often hear that it doesn't matter about the hair, where you wear your hair, but it's very important, the image that you portray.
I think maybe you can get it over there.
Some of it is obviously a mere fashion fad that will pass with the moment. But part of this Afro boom is bound up with black pride and black separateness, a desire not to look like other Americans. Even the Negro middle classes have their dashikis.
Well, what do you think is the reason for this Afro-American styling now? What's the big impulse behind it?
I think it's the new black awareness that we have. We're tired of the American styles. We find that the African styles just suit us better.
Violence and sexuality are the two of the main themes in these films, and it does perpetuate the notion that African American people are violent and overly sexed. These are sort of like the base emotions that have been ascribed to African Americans by whites.
Damn, look like my women is on time. Baby, I could sure warm you up.
No shit, baby.
I can dig it. Dolomite is my name, and f***ing up motherfuckers is my game. Breathing down your neck.
Damn! And again, because the United States has been so influential to the rest of the world. Like, the United States is like the television that the rest of the world watches and has often gotten their cues from. What's hip, what's trendy, what to do, what not to do, fashion sense, musically. Everybody's taking their cue from us, which is why the power of television and movies is a big deal.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there is an over-representation of black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
I think that what we have to do in the United States is understand everybody has inside of them racialized thinking, racial fears. We all have those fears. I mean, keep in mind that black cops also make negative associations and threat associations when they're presented with black images.
Police officers, in my judgment, particularly white police officers, are excessively and disproportionately afraid. They sublimate this fear because it's not a socially acceptable emotion in the police culture, but they're afraid of young black men. And the bigger the black man, the darker the skin of the black man, the more easy it is for police officers to dehumanize that individual and to compensate for their fear. And more often than not, that takes the, I don't want to sound like an armchair psychologist, but I was a cop for 34 years, and I've seen this over and over and over.
I gotta say to white America, bravo. You guys have pulled off the world's greatest Jedi mind trick on society. Yeah. Because this notion that black men are to be feared and black men and black people are scary is hilarious to me. Because historically speaking, white people, you guys have been the most dangerous motherfuckers on the planet. You wiped out the Indians. You kidnapped niggas. You repressed us for 400 years. We get beat by the judicial system. We get beat and killed by the cops.